up for righteousness. Stand up for justice. Stand up for truth.
I truly believe that thoughts are the greatest vehicle to change.
We do not care whether the cat is black or white, as long as it can catch mice.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Victory in spite of all terror. Victory however long and hard the road may be.
To those waiting with bated breath for that favorite media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. U-turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
All of the great leaders have had one characteristic in common. It was the willingness to confront unequivocally the major anxiety of their people in their time. Is a quote from Canadian-American economist, diplomat and intellectual John Kenneth Galbraith, one of the most influential and widely read economists of the 20th century. I thought this was a fitting quote for our guest today, at a time when leadership is being closely examined as people seek clarity about the vision and confidence in the future. Our guest is Mick Mccormack, Chairman of Central Petroleum Limited and Non-Executive Director of Origin Energy, Austal and the Clontarf Foundation. He was previously Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of APA Group, one of Australia's leading energy infrastructure businesses. In his 14 years at the helm, APA Group grew from 30 employees with assets worth $1.3 billion to 3,000 employees, assets of $24 billion and a top 50 ASX-listed company. Hello and welcome to another episode of No Limitations, a show where we speak to elite world-class performing men and women and unlock their secrets and influences that have shaped their destinies and that you could apply to your own life. For our first-time listeners from all over the world, please don't forget to follow on your preferred podcast platform and share with your friends and colleagues. And for our listeners in Canada, Indonesia and Germany, a big hello. I'm your host, Greg Robinson, Managing Partner of Blenheim Partners, Executive Search and Board Advisory. In a candid conversation, Mick offers his frank assessment on the current state of affairs in Australia, its leadership, the contentious debate on energy, and matters surrounding the ageing population, support for the Indigenous Australians, and a hard look at the values we promote as a society. Finally, having transitioned from his executive career to the boardroom, Mick reflects on the change of pace and shares the lessons that has allowed him to be more effective in the new setting. So sit back and enjoy Shooting the Breeze. Mick, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Really nice to be back here. And gee whiz, it's been about 18 months, I guess, since the last time. And we've had, a couple of false starts, bloody COVID getting in the way. But anyway, it is what it is. Very pleased to see you. I won't say ugly face, but yeah, see your face again. So
don't say ugly. No, that's not a good way to start, Mick.
Well, it's either that or I'm looking at a mirror.
Now, how's it out there in the bush, Mick? You've had a bit of time out.
Yeah, look, I have, Greg, and it's amazing how things play out. I gave up work, let's just say, 2 years ago, I guess. Retired from full time work. I had to sit at home on gardening leave for a full 12 months. That's all good as well. And then COVID sort of hits in the middle of that, so I've been out of the game basically for 2 years. But look, everything about COVID's negative, but to be honest with you, I think there's a fair bit of positives in there. I suppose be a lot of executives like me either still working or they've given up full-time work, and COVID's really forced them to have a rethink about what's important in life. For me, I last couple of years doing some work around the property, and as they say, there's freedom in physical work. You do something, you fix a fence, you mark up some cattle, whatever. At the end of the day,
you'd be out there hunting like a madman, wouldn't you, and fishing and shooting everything in the way, or be calming down now?
Yeah, well, yes, I
look at you, you're agile these days, Mick.
Yes, doing a bit of hunting, shooting, fishing, and the wild pig population certainly decreased very dramatically. And I better clarify that, Greg, for my inner city listeners, when you live out in the bush in Australia, in fact, lots of places around the world, wild pigs, feral pigs, do untold damage to properties and even your domestic stock. So they need to be, let's just say, got rid of. But years and years ago, Greg, on the family property up in Proserpine, me chasing after some wild pigs with a few dogs and a knife, that's a pure form of hunting.
Yeah, right.
I haven't done that for a while. I leave that to my boys. So and so these days, it's they come home and pull out the weaponry and clean up the wild pigs. So yeah.
Are they the Razorbacks?
In the US, they call them Razorbacks. The same thing.
Right.
They're effectively just domestic pigs that generations ago will let go, and pigs will eat anything. They breed well, and the conditions in most Australia for the last couple of years for most feral animals has been very, very good. Lots of rain, lots of grass, lots of cover. But we've got to get away from hunting wild pigs, Greg. That's
No, but I guess in between the shooting everything that moves, you've had a chance to.
No, and again, I just got to clarify. We're very happy to get rid of feral animals.
Yes.
Anything else that we shoot gets eaten.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So that's whether that's domestic or otherwise, if anything else gets shot, it gets eaten. But
it's been interesting, hasn't it, Mick? You've had, like you say, 24 months out. You've been at the bush. Actually, how's the bush faring? How's how you talked about COVID? Now, some people have been finding it pretty tough, but how's the bush going?
In country Queensland, the borders have been, let's just say, pretty much shut for the rest of the country.
Yep.
But really what that's meant for the regional areas is that people that typically were living in the cities and typically would have otherwise, drop 50, 100 grand on a ski trip or, wherever else they go in Europe during our winter, with the borders being shut, they've dropped that sort of money on four-wheel drives and, tricked them up with all the camping gear and they come out, out past our place. So the local towns.
Yeah, they've got nothing to shoot, but have they?
Greg, you got to have a life. Mate, you're going to get me in big strife, mate. I guess I'm lucky I'm not working. Yeah, I have got a weapons license, folks, so it's all kosher.
Okay, you left your knife at home, right?
Yeah, and my knife's at home. Yeah, you want to see a knife? Mate, I got one in my backpack. So.
That's right.
No, so the people they trick it, but rather than spending money overseas. They've got nowhere to spend it, so they've tricked up four-wheel drive camper vans and all that sort of stuff and come out in the regional areas and discover the beauty of domestic tourism. So the regional areas have done very well.
So spirits up, fatigue hasn't set in?
Oh, I think spirits are up. I notice coming back to the city a bit more now, fatigue certainly set in down here.
Yeah.
But I think it's a combination of in the bush, we're really insulated from COVID. We didn't have to wear masks and we're free to move pretty much. And you think about it, people in the bush, it's a big deal to go overseas. It's a big deal to go from wherever you live into the nearest city.
Yep.
That's how you don't tend to do that on a daily basis or even weekly basis.
Yep.
Versus people in the cities, a bit more money and whatnot. You're jumping on the plane to go to Bali for a long weekend or over across the ditch NZ.
Now, you've had also an opportunity, Mick. I'm just sort of reflecting on this a bit. Let's not lose sight of the fact that our podcast is all about leadership and high performance. And as a leader, as an ex-CEO and now board director, I guess you've had the opportunity to sort of examine, look at what Federation has brought to us, good, bad, and what leadership has stood out or hasn't stood out. Bit of a tough question for you, Mick, but what's your observation of how the premiers and how the federal ministers, etc., have sort of conducted themselves, or maybe to the average citizen of Australia, in terms of leadership?
Yeah, no, you're right. When you have got a bit of time on your hands and, now I can sit in the tractor and listen to, talkback radio and read the papers, all that sort of stuff. Not that I'm reading the paper and sit on the tractor, although you can because you can put it on GPS stuff. Anyway, no, I'll be honest with you, Greg, I've reflected on that. I've been really disappointed because I've realised that all levels of government, to my mind, and even the bureaucracy, complete and utter lack of accountability. Decisions are being made without any real thought of what is the ramifications of those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you mentioned Federation. I think COVID's just demonstrably told me or said to me that we need to get the whole concept of federation rejigged. There should be an inquiry into that, because quite simply with COVID, in my view, it's failed. You know, the idea that you can have a national, federal government turning up with their health advice, which is at odds with the health advice with the various states. And let's be frank here, Greg, all the health advice seems to have just lined up with whatever the politics were going at the time. So I haven't seen any written health advice during the whole of COVID.
Yeah, right.
So no, politics really got in the way there. And I said about the lack of accountability. I mean, all the decisions that have been made that have cost people their lives, whether that's Ruby Princess here in New South Wales.
That's right. Beginning of it all, yep.
Just the stupidity. I mean, I'll call it stupidity. Remember the COVID app? Remember they spent about, $5 million developing this app and about $30 million to advertise it. And to date, I think there's been about 2 people have heard their gadget go ping, ping.
Yeah.
You've been close. And that was when I really dawned on me. I thought, gee whiz, when that was announced, you had the Prime Minister, whoever it was, saying, get the app. They said, I'll just download it, and of course, I thought, hang on, some pencil-pushing bureaucrat in Canberra's come up with this, probably 25 years old, got every gadget known to man or woman, because they're working for the government. If they download it, mate, out where I am, people don't have, they've got mobile phones, but they're Nokias, they're just phones. They don't download anything. So straight away, I asked myself a question, this is not going to work, because who's going to, like my in-laws?
Yeah.
You had to have a bloody smartphone or whatever that is to go on. So that fell on a great heap of whatever. Just, the rapid antigen tests. Remember I had mates around the world. They were pick up in Europe. They had access to the rapid antigen tests.
Yeah.
What, a year in front of us? And that was part of the whole COVID thing. You test yourself. If you're positive, don't go out or whatever. And yes, they still had the PCR stuff. But here in Australia, no, we had to have PCR tests. And I'll be cynical here, mate, but I think I know I'm right. The only reason that happened was that, if you have PCR tests exclusively, they are done by the big pharmaceutical outfits. So you do rapid antigen tests, all of a sudden you and I can do them. So, you can see another case of big buddy corporations capturing government. But I could AstraZeneca. I'm, as you know, up in Queensland. AstraZeneca, I think I'm more right than wrong here, saved most of the bloody planet in respect of the vaccinations for COVID.
Yes.
But in Queensland, no, you had a chief health officer.
Who got promoted? To
Governor General, who basically shit-canned it, and that put, no one wanted to get AstraZeneca, And yet, Mark, go on and just stop me when you the first up, get the jab, get 2 jabs and we're all good. We'll get 2 jabs, then 3 jabs, and we're still not good, as in with isolation rules and all that sort of carry on. So, and, the thing about politicians, they love a crisis. They love having population in fear because it's easy to, just easy to govern and keep the bloody population in fear. But did I answer your question? Federation, I think COVID really showed up that, federation, in my view, is buggered. Can you imagine, I'm just exaggerating to make my point, you imagine the barbarians coming over the tip of Cape York? What would you have Victorians doing, or New South Wales, based on COVID experience? Well, have fun, Queensland, but we're putting the border up. Or they come in from Perth or, up from, just based on COVID, he's a bloody rabble.
What would you change, Mick? What do we have to do?
Well,
rather than just an inquiry, Josh, you're sounding like a politician. You're just as bad as them, Mick.
Bloody inquiry. Yeah, but you only have an inquiry if you know the answer.
That's right.
That's where it gets pretty difficult, Greg, because to change things means that the states would probably have to cede or give up some power. But, I'd like to think that given what has happened with COVID, I'm obviously a fan of bloody democracy, but in Australia here for the last, say, 30, 40 years, like at least 30, most of my, in fact, all of my, apart from the first 10 years of my working career, it's a growing economy. Life's been good, easy. As they say, when bad stuff happens, that's when your character gets tested.
Yep.
And I think our politicians have been sorely wanting there, because they're just used to dropping into the political bureaucracy and, jump on a plane, go around the world, go to UN, this, that, everything else, bugger eyes around, tell the rest of us what to do, but don't do it themselves. The Federation, the bad stuff with COVID has shown the cracks there. And I'd like to, I know it won't happen, but if there was to be a serious discussion around what COVID taught us in respect of protecting the whole nation in a coherent, consistent way, I think that discussion would lead to, having to think about rejigging where the powers for national security and such like should lie.
Yeah.
But yeah, mate, I'm living in fantasy like the rest of the population. That won't happen, and I doubt it will happen, but it should.
And what do you think of the average Australian? There wasn't a lot of marching or protesting. I thought that was pretty interesting too, Mick. We can sit back and say we're not a fan of the governments, but at the end of the day, they're supposed to represent us.
Yeah,
and where were we?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Greg. I got mates, I guess through business over the years, particularly in the US, and we talked about hunting, shooting, fishing earlier. So those mates tend to be in the lower part of the US. They say to me, "What's going on with Aussies? With the Aussies? You're just laying down like half dead dogs and getting whipped. How could you possibly just sit there and take that to government?" And as I say to them, well, interestingly, for all you think about Australians, we're a pretty socialistic and left-leaning country, compared to, say, the US, other places. So I can't fathom that. I'm sound like you're surprised. I'm equally surprised. Yeah. I followed the rules because I had to. I'm still trying to do some business. So to get in a plane, I had to be vaccinated. So you make the choice.
Yep.
So in a sense, you had to. But the whole COVID situation really fractured society in the sense of you had people who they probably still wish that COVID was happening. They're happy to be working from home. I get a sense of that here in the cities. You get some people out where I come from, I live, they're still thinking that people like me who got 3 vaccines, I'm getting tracked by the government and going to die in 5 years, and I got a I got a chip in my head somewhere. They otherwise sane people believe all this stuff because they pick it up on the internet. So I think also it leads to, like Victoria, the longest running jurisdiction in lockdown,
in the world.
And the whole of COVID, we've almost forgotten now because what we've been through, and some very sad cases of relatives dying, and others can't come across borders to see them, whatever. And I think the real cost of COVID is yet to be seen. I think it'll play out over next 5 or 10 years. You think about it, kids. I said earlier, it's good for executive types in the sense that without travelling, they've actually had to stay at home. So families have seen their fathers, mothers, whatever, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But kids in the formative years, whether you're going into primary school or kindergarten, they'd probably call it, I'm out of Jurassic Park, they'd probably call it maybe something else in kindergarten, but primary school, high school, my younger bloke finished up engineering at University of Queensland last December, a couple of months ago. And for the last 2 years, haven't really interacted with, his course group.
Yeah, right.
That's the whole fun of uni. No point going to uni if you can't get a beer. So if you're stuck studying, that's anyway.
It's just a distraction.
So I just think, he's always bagging me. You drink too much. Yeah, fair enough. That's fine. But I did get through uni, just. So no, I don't know. I'm just musing, Greg. I think the real cost of COVID we're going to see in the next 5, 10, 15 years, and. I've been involved with Indigenous causes with teenage boys, mostly for decades.
Yeah, okay.
Unless you tell people, they don't realise. When you shut down access to schools and, just getting around places, I'm now talking in remote areas, and it's one of my other bugbears. The rules that apply to high-density areas like Sydney here,
yes,
with COVID isolation, they should be completely and utterly different from the rules that apply you know, 350 miles southwest of, 400 kilometres southwest of Alice Springs in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
Point is that our programs for Indigenous boys and getting them into safe places like schools and whatever, you know, you start introducing isolation rules, shutting down our ability to do that, you get these vulnerable boys have got no safe place to go, like school.
Yep.
Or our staff getting them to school and looking after them. You know, all of a sudden you see interactions with police go up.
Yeah.
You know, so was a whole heap of I think consequences which have come out of COVID. You know, we'll yet to witness.
I'll come to that in a little bit later, actually, Mick. As you also know, Mick, we've had in the short recent time inflation, interest rates, both have risen in the last few weeks, and not too far away, Mick, we've got an election coming up. Now, I thought leaders are there to inspire, to engage, to motivate, and to get an outcome for the country, right?
And also lead.
That's right.
You know, if you're a leader, even if you think you're, you know, just pretend you are. Like, just even if you don't know what you're doing, just pretend you do. Just you have to lead. And mate, interest rates. I just this again, a complete and utter lack of accountability. You got all these gross generalisation here, so shoot me down, folks. Sitting around that RBA board, you got inner city elites, you got typically city-based corporate honchos and bureaucrats and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
To leave that there, you've got the boss of the RBA for the last couple of years, and at least up until the last 12 months, telling all and sundry, it's all right, folks. You keep borrowing money. We're not going to touch interest rates until 2024.
Yeah, that's right.
I sit on a couple of boards and, you know, got a property, all that sort of stuff. Mate, my prices that I've experienced and on the boards I'm on, they've been going up for 12 months. So how possibly we see a tick up in inflation in the last 2 quarters ago, the last one's 5 point something, and all of a sudden, shock horror. Wow, inflation's up? No, I'm just narked because, and this is where I'm bagging them, the narrative coming out of the RBA, I mean, it's just irresponsible. And I don't think I'm alone there.
Mm.
Maybe it's a gross generalisation, so happen to get shot down on it, but, you know, well-intentioned, but obviously somewhat ignorant people sitting around the RBA board table let it drift for a year. And then all of a sudden, and what's that got to do with leadership and politics? Well, rather than governments taking credit for interest rates continuing to go down or stay low, fine, they can take credit for that, but they should be tagging on the end of that. Well, you know, in free enterprise societies, as sure as night follows day, low interest rates precede higher interest rates. So, folks, you know, we've had a great 10 or 12 years of declining interest rates, but the time will come when they going to start to bounce up. You know, I know it's only 25 basis points from 0.01 or something, which is bugger all, but still, you know, all of a sudden everyone's spooked, and cost of living and inflation, and which, you know, that's leadership. You know, rather than taking political credit for all this stuff, it's, you know, leadership's around, if you're a politician, in fact, a business leader, yeah, fine, we're having good times, but let's just keep at least one eye on what the future might entail. And as I keep saying, mate, I'm no bloody economist, but they cycle. You go, low interest rates aren't necessarily a sign of a healthy economy. That's why they're low. And inflation, you know, ipso facto, inflation, some degree of inflation is a sign of a healthy economy, and you don't want to get it too healthy. That's where interest rates are typically the break. But, you know, it won't result in the fact that, you know, I think the RBA got that completely and utterly wrong, absolutely wrong.
And what about the actual discourse and what you've heard so far, both Liberal and Labor and all and sundry? You know, there's a big push for independence at the moment too, Mick. So what's your take on where the country's at?
Well, it's pretty hard to stay awake, isn't it, listening to them, to be honest with you. I mean, you know, small target and no target, and, you know, this presidential style carry on, you know, and, you know, my background's energy, of course, and like for the last couple of elections, federally, you know, bugger all coming out of there policy-wise in energy.
Well, what has come out of that? Because, a little bit about energy. Has it evolved at all during the last 5-10 years, and what both parties are putting forward now? Is there anything moving forward?
Well, I'll tell you what both parties aren't putting forward to right now, Greg, is that, I don't quote me on the exact number, but I'm more right than wrong. Wholesale electricity prices 12 months ago versus today, I haven't checked today, but they're probably up 100%, so double. If it's not double, they're, well over, so serious up there. So energy prices, that must flow through the retail sector. So energy prices are increasing. Okay. And here we are, we've been told the transition, we're going to go away from black and brown coal and all that sort of, transition to a cleaner energy future, which like I've said, a million times, even people out where I are, we all want that to happen. But, in the city here, it's all about let's do it tomorrow and bugger the consequences, because the lights won't go off in Sydney. They'll go off where we are. Whereas out where I am, it's we want to do that, but let's make sure it's a planned transition so we know what it's going to cost, who's going to pay it, and that the lights are going to stay on.
Well, what is a planned transition, Mick? Because I hear it, but how long are you talking about? If you're a chief exec for the day to overrun, to manage this planned transition.
Well, there is no, right now,
there
is no planned transition. And we've all signed up to net zero to 2050, or at least let's just say most of the developing countries.
Yes.
That's great.
Yep.
But the downside of that is that there's been a completely there's been no lack of coordination between those countries signing up to net zero in 2050 in how we're going to get there. So we've all got, that's the target, but there's no plan around what's to happen to get there. And in the absence of detailed policy, you've got state governments and also business, and business is trying to make money out of this. So they're making decisions accordingly to invest in renewables or whatever it is to make money. And my concern about that is that, a planned transition would have us detailing, this is how we're going to get there. These are the coal-fired or, gas plant, whatever, that will, in an orderly way come out.
Yep.
Here's the price signal. And, you can't have a planned transition without some sort of price signal on carbon. And here's where, where it's very disappointing for me, because I'm, as a younger person, I was floating around in 2005 or 6, John Howard was Prime Minister, and they had a task force there to set up, put a price on carbon, which is a cap and trade scheme. So forget the details. It was a price on carbon. And the idea was, it was going to be 0.0001 cent, so nothing. And then over the next 25 years, just slowly crank it up. Now, had that plan not got bastardised by successive governments, that's 2005, so to now, what's that, 17 years?
Yeah.
We'd be halfway there. There'd be no brown coal going. There'd probably no bugger or black coal. We've blown up 17 years. And today we've got a political divide, because you've got those people, and well-intentioned as they are, they want to get away from fossil fuels tomorrow, but you cannot do that without major impacts in respect of reliability to the system, as in blackouts. It's easy to talk about we're going to put more renewables in with batteries, but to do that on a big scale, sooner rather than later, it's not going to happen. And then equally, you've got people who want to persist with coal-fired, fossil fuel power generation. But it comes back to the nature of Australian politics right now. Again, it's easy for me to talk about this stuff. I'm not a politician. The answer is it's very simple, just not all that easy to bring into being, because you've got, whether you're Liberal, National, they've got the right-wing fringe there who are, they're not going to support anything around carbon pricing or, whatever. You got the Labor with the Green loony left fringe attached to that. And with an election coming up at hung Parliament, I don't think that's good news for stable policy either in an energy sense.
So what is the truth, Mick? Now, all of us read the newspapers, and it does get a bit blurry sometimes. But in regards to renewable energy, when do you think it's actually going to become truly viable? And we never hear the word nuclear that often, do we?
Yeah, well, look, renewable energy is viable now. It's there's no question it's cheap. But, all I'm getting at is that, it's raining in Sydney here at the moment. If I've got a solar panel outside your front door here, this microphone not going to work, is it?
No.
So that's, it's one thing to say, yes, it's cheap, and then use that as an argument to say, shut down all the coal. I'm just being pragmatic here.
Yeah.
You shut down all the coal tomorrow. It's like the whole AGL, the demerger thing going on. Non-Australians, a big Australian energy companies basically splitting its asset base from generation and retail. So, then that merger's been contested on the basis that, some of the shareholders want to do that sooner. But I can't, if AGL was to, someone gets control of it and says we're going to shut down coal, where's the backup? You take off certain amount of capacity out of the system, where's the backup? Where's the replacement coming from? And again, you can say, just more renewables, but it's not as simple and as cheap as that. I've been saying for decades, once we have a technological breakthrough that you've got a battery the size of, I've got a Coke can in my hand, the size of that can keep a house going for 24 hours and cost, $15.
Yeah.
Job done.
Yeah, right.
Right now, I do the same thing. I need something as big as that bloody bar fridge you got in the corner.
Yeah.
Same as hydrogen.
Yep.
Hydrogen, cracking components to make hydrogen. I mean, that's no big deal. It's in compound form. It's, natural gas, coal, water, just whack it with some energy and bang, crack it and you produce hydrogen, No big deal. And how you do that, if you do use renewables, because you probably heard green, that's green hydrogen, there's bloody pink hydrogen, grey hydrogen, brown hydrogen, black, depending on what the... So, yeah, all simple. And the whole world's jumped up, particularly Australia. We've got hydrogen hubs all over the joint. But it's interesting because I often get asked about hydrogen and I'm you're negative. I said, no, I'm not negative about it. It's doable, but before we all jump on the train, direction and destination we don't know, let's just get some basic pragmatic issues attached to it on the table so you can understand. And in looking at that, I remember George W. Bush in what they call State of the Union address or something in 2003, 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that was a big swag of money was going to go into hydrogen. He said that, by 2020, we're going to have hydrogen-powered cars on the roads, US roads. And as I see today, there's not one hydrogen car on a US road.
Mm.
So, that's the difficulties there. But anyway, no, for those that are interested, the hydrogen is a gas. It's very light, flammable, and unfortunately very explosive. Transporting it's a bit challenging. You can put it through custom-made pipelines in liquid form or ammonia. And if, you put hydrogen into our existing gas pipeline network in Australia, which a lot of people think, that's easy to do. And of course it's easy to do, but once you go more than 10% of hydrogen, it becomes dangerous, as in the hydrogen component causes something in the steel called embrittlement, code for, it might blow up.
Yeah, right.
And then after you've got to change all your burner tips on your gas appliances, all that sort of stuff. It hasn't been proven at scale yet. But these are, that's like any technology. You can, the more you do it at the larger scale, the more it becomes viable. But I just asked the question, the focus on hydrogen right now, is it really a practical means to an end? And I just also see that many punters turn up to the party sticking their hands out for government subsidy.
Yeah, right.
Which is a bit of a worry for me too. But
what about nuclear?
Well, mate, I will get shot down. I'll never get invited back to your podcast now. Nuclear should be absolutely on the table. I mean, Australians are a funny bunch, eh? In fact, I would say we're pretty selfish. We're happy to be the world's biggest producer, exporter of uranium. That's good. Dig it up, make a quid out of it. But, we won't even let people pay us to go and bury it out in the middle of nowhere.
That's right.
And then on the way through, we can't have any nuclear plants. And, one technology that I find very appealing and doable right now is the modular nuclear plants, which are, as the name infers, is small physically small nuclear power plants that, and they're modular. You can, put them anywhere. So if we could get over that, and unfortunately with green taint against uranium for the best part of 50 years now, there hasn't been all that much, generally speaking, not a real lot of technical engineering advances in the technology. But you imagine if nuclear had been in wider use than what it is now in the last, say, 50 years. And yes, people say, what about Chernobyl? Well, come on. Am I going to buy a car made in Russia? No. Why is that? Well, I couldn't trust it. Am I going to go and a similar vein, do you really think a nuclear plant in Russia is the standout example of technology? Of course not. And the one in Japan, unfortunately,
Fukushima.
Yeah, the power plant itself was fine. They just got it fundamentally wrong, the cooling system on a fault line. So once the earthquake hit, couldn't cool it down. So, but no, nuclear should be well on the table. And if we could get that happening, that's the greenest of all, and the footprint is so small as well.
Now I'm going to sidestep here for a little bit, Mick. You're involved with Indigenous Australians. What's happening out there? What's the plight of the communities? I don't think we have a real solid discussion about it, do we?
No, I've said in the last podcast, grew up with them, on my family property and whatever, and had a lifelong, affinity, not necessarily with them, but certainly with their plight. And I said last time, in many cases, the plight of Indigenous Australians in my lifetime has gone backwards, it hasn't gone forwards. Shame as it is for me to say this, I could take you to a number of places in Australia where you would be absolutely and tomorrow, I could take you tomorrow, you'd be horrified with the conditions these people are living in, and just the desperate lives they lead. It is what it is, and you can only focus on that bit that you can make a difference, and that's where the Contar Foundation comes in. We try and encourage boys, turn Indigenous boys into good men.
Yeah, right.
And just as that's a cycle, good men tend to lead more meaningful lives, and particularly those around them, wise partners, and in future their own kids. So that's the cycle. But I think unfortunately there's a lot of politics gets caught up with Indigenous, particularly Indigenous politics.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty difficult. I mentioned earlier I could take you to places tomorrow that make you cry. You think, oh, let's just get in there and fix it straight away, but you can't. So the cure isn't always acceptable, particularly to the non-Indigenous people. But and I often say that the issues that non-Indigenous people see around in Indigenous conditions don't line up with what Indigenous people see. Here in Sydney, they have a big march every Australia Day.
Yeah.
Mate, I take it out there. The average Indigenous mother, mate, you ask her what's your top 5 issues, and when Australia Day wouldn't even rate on the list.
Yeah,
it's about things like getting the kids a job, get access to healthcare, get them, not the kids, but just the booze and drugs that are rife through the community, that sort of stuff, pretty basic. Access to school. Yeah. So, no, I sound a bit negative there, Greg, but as I said, I won't back away from what I said. In my lifetime, the plight of Indigenous people, particularly out there, has got worse, not got better. And I can only take some comfort in the work that the Contar Foundation does. We've got over 10,000 boys now in our program. So that's from basically young boys through to last year of school. That's the whole focus on the program, is getting them into and staying into school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also accepting that the white man's wrecked their culture. So it's beyond just saying, oh, just leave them out there, put a fence around them, and let them go back to whatever they're doing. I mean, we've wrecked their culture. So the best thing we can do for them is help them get into our economy. So they then got the opportunity, they can reconcile with country and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And we don't teach them culture because we're not Indigenous. So, but we give them the means to hopefully get into our economy and get good jobs and, et cetera, and just becomes compounding.
Is it moving in the right direction, Mick?
Oh, I think our program is absolutely. And, I having said that, there's some other very good programs, and I have one of my other stock standard whinges whenever I can get in front of an audience and talk about these sorts of things is, if any corporate is thinking about doing something for Indigenous, just have a think about if, what you're doing, if it involves money, have a think about not just doing something internally, as in setting up a foundation and then having to staff it and whatever, and you feel good about that. If you're going to spend some money on it, how about having a think about putting that money into an existing charitable effort that demonstrably works and then is scalable, because you're actually going to make a difference. I see that many big companies, and not so big companies, set up their own foundation. So there's hundreds of them, and all separate bloody administrations and all that sort of stuff. And when I hit them up with that, I bore them and said, the staff, we like to do our own thing. I said, no, you're feeling good because you're doing your own thing. Sure, you're doing something for out there, but, for what you're spending in admin costs, if it went into the Contar Foundation, or I'm not, talking my own book, of course, but you could put into, there's any number of them. I just say to people, if you've got money, have a think about putting into something that works, demonstrably works, keeps numbers, is scalable. And I keep saying scalable because the extent of the problem, Greg, is from Cape York to Melbourne, from Brisbane to bloody Perth. And in fact, you go up to Darwin and Cape York, Tiwi Islands and a few other places. So it's across the country, so it's got to be scalable. Versus doing a death, aren't I? Versus just saying, well, there's a map of Australia, throw a dart, bang it lands somewhere, 200 kilometres southwest of Longreach, let's set something up there. That's my sales pitch for any corporates out there.
So on a leadership play there, Mick, and we're talking leadership again, have we led in helping them out? Spent a lot of money as a nation.
The answer is no. Again, this is my point. We can feel good about giving them, and it's interesting who them is, money, and we're talking about Indigenous people, but it's no different. You get governments involved with and bureaucracies involved with anything, mate. The bigger it gets, the more shithouse results are. So whether I'm talking about our medical system or Indigenous affairs or response to bloody COVID, look at our medical system, the money that goes in, NDIS, the money that it just poured into it. And out the back end of it, just get a drip and a bloody squirt and a bit of a fart every now and again. The NDIS has only been around, I know I'm getting off topic here, but have a spray. The NDIS has only been around a couple of years. And where I'm out, where we are, it's just rotted. There's every bugger's either on the NDIS or working for it. You got neighbours taking neighbours. One neighbour will get on you must do some online course, become a carer, or able to, be a carer, doctor and that's easy out there. Doctors will sign anything. Neighbour take another neighbour down shopping, or builders, NDIS, just multiply the invoice by 3 or 5 or whatever. I think going back to the election, I heard Labor Party said they're going to try and, get rid of the admin cost. My in-laws, factual case. They got a couple of home care packages only because every other bugger's getting them. So they get 2 home care packages for doing some physio and whatever, and $8,000 each. And I saw the invoice, $4,000 in project management.
Don't throw them under the bus there, Mick.
No, I'm not. But not only that, they're a couple.
Yep.
And they wouldn't service them together.
Yeah, right.
I know. We got a separate, I'll come out now because this is, they're an hour and a half from, where the service provider, and going back to Indigenous, the same thing. We just got this mentality of, we started the whole conversation, lack of accountability. That's what I've seen. Let's say we're going to do something, spend some money, and good, the money's spent, but no one asks the question about what's the outcome. And if the outcome's not flash, well, someone, as they say, head should roll, but that doesn't seem to happen. We just move on to the next issue. It just takes more money.
Aged care is one of your bugbears as well, isn't it?
Mate, we're going on. We're going on a downhill ride today.
Yeah, we'll turn it around in a sec. But it's crucial. This is all part of what's going to, the governments are standing up and representing. And we're not a younger society, we're only getting older.
Yeah. Oh, no, well, we've had the conversation before. Aged care, no, that's right. None of us are getting any younger. And I'm certainly at an age where you've got parents who, starting to see the back end of their lives in a health sense. And my wife is the chair of a local aged care facility up there in regional Queensland, the name of which I won't disclose because I don't want to get her in strife. One of her bugbears, and I see this, is that during the COVID pandemic in particular, all the issues around aged care and how bad it isn't reflected in the smaller aged care facilities like those in the regional areas in the country. And that's pretty simple to understand why, because, again, governments get involved. You know, they corporatise all this stuff. So you've got, wherever you've got big government subsidies coming in to any sector of the economy, you're going to have half-smart entrepreneurs in there pretty soon after. So the issues around aged care that have been well publicised in the media in the last couple of years have been all around typically big city facilities. And, you know, they're all about getting people into an institution, you know, scale economies, all of that sort of stuff, which is precisely what aged care shouldn't be. And this, you know, the Aged Care Royal Commission talked about this. Irrespective of corporate structure, the best aged care facilities are smallish in number, as in they've got a relatively small number of residents. So then you don't have nurse to resident issues like they've got in the cities here. Most importantly, in those small facilities, as my wife says, the day the manager of the facility doesn't know every resident personally, that's the day that, you know, the provision of service starts to decay. So smaller scale aged care facilities don't have the staff to nurse issues that they've got in fact, they take this for granted. The staff know all the residents, the managers know all the residents. In fact, most of the residents have grown up in the same place the staff have, you know, so all of a sudden, you know, if we've grown up together, Greg, and after, you know, 70 years, I'm looking after you in an aged care facility, I'm hardly going to turn up and treat you badly, am I?
No. Oh, you might.
Well, I was going to say, I think a reason I'm going to say, yeah, unless you dudded me on that, that bee owed me one day.
That's right.
And you know, my wife's issue is the people generally out there working in the facilities are all well-intentioned. Their wages aren't all that flash.
No.
And again, that's driven because bigger places, they want to keep the wages down because it helps the profits. About 70% of the cost of an aged care facility is in the wages. So yeah, as I said, my wife's biggest issue for the facilities that she can speak to is not so much the wages. It's just that very well-intentioned and well-meaning and very empathetic staff just see themselves getting bloody pasted in the press every day because other facilities, particularly in the cities, with pretty much a profit motive, get the media. But as I said, you know, heavy subsidies in any industry, that sucks the corporates in. They take the money, trim the service, you know, and crank up the profits. That's what tends to happen. But unfortunately, with aged care, you're dealing with real people. And the last point I'll make too, I mentioned home care packages earlier on. You know, the thing that the people in the industry in aged care facility don't want to see is that to have people who should be in aged care scared about going into aged care because they hear bad stories. You know, again, I'm speaking for where I'm at. People out there, once they can't really care for themselves, they need to go into aged care. So there's no point having somebody who can't look after their personal hygiene and all that sort of stuff. No point them staying at home in a big old lonely cold house and have trouble going out the front gate or the front door to get the Meals on Wheels, only because they're scared of going into aged care. They're much better to have those people get into aged care. All of a sudden they're part of a community. And that's the important thing. You know, there's nothing worse than being lonely at the best of times. So, yeah, that's the rant on aged care. I mean, there's two slants to it. All the bad stuff about aged care is what's happening in the cities, and that typically is big corporates with profit motives, and again, no accountability. All this stuff is absolutely regulated. They're audited. So where's the regulators? Well, that's a good question. Mate, if they were following the rules, wouldn't have the issues.
Yeah, very true.
So, they go missing.
Well, it takes us on to the next fun topic, gambling, alcohol. Well, they've had some regulators gone amiss.
Yeah, bloody hell, mate, what a shocker. I got very bad memories of, my family, and no point going into breaking up old coals. It is what it is. Between bloody gambling, alcohol, I'll be in a crusade forever. I got no issue. If you want to drink, you want to gamble, fine. But I got a huge issue in Australia here that gambling in particular has just taken over so much of the media. You can't watch football here. You have footy plays, you have all manner of stars coming on the TV and radio and in print media, basically trying to tell you how much fun it is to gamble on just about anything. So, in my view, that should be gambling and booze as well. Booze, of course, the nation that much aggravation. It should be banned, as in not the activity, but the advertising for the activity. And you mentioned gaming, Greg. Since we last spoke, mate, those Royal Commissions or whatever the commissions into Star, what's the other outfit? Crown? God, street. I mean, it's just corrupt. And here you have these boards. I mean, I call them in a city elites, but mates, you have these boards sitting around a table pretending that, because they can get private jets going around the joint, all the large jets come with, being on the board of a gambling outfit, pretending that they're not they're not money laundering when they got all these special rooms and there's people coming in and like shock horror. But I go back to my point. I presume that the gambling industry in Australia is probably very, very highly regulated. Mate, where's the regulators been? They've been on the private jet too. Where have they been? And all of a sudden, shock horror, you can't believe it. One inquiry's underway now, and I see the CEO there, or ex-CEO, is talking about, Jesus, I didn't realise what was going on. The executive never told me. Shit, imagine me running that story back in APA days. You'd be drop-kicked out the door. In fact, you wouldn't be drop-kicked, you'd be thrown out the bloody window. Oh, sorry, board, I didn't know what was going on. They didn't tell me. But aren't you the CEO? Yeah. Only paying you a bucket load of money? Yeah. But, but I'm not supposed to ask, it's just atrocious. And that, verifies my point. Show me a bloody casino, mate, and I'll show you complete and utter den of iniquity. Money laundering, old shooting match. So anyway, good luck to them. Having said that, I do back everybody horse in the Melbourne Cup, $100 each way. So that's the only time I can be guaranteed. Yeah, good luck to them, but they, like booze, mate, they should not be advertised. And gambling, just particularly in the last couple of years, because I've watched a bit more of TV and stuff.
Well, it comes hand in hand with sport a lot, Mick.
I think there's probably more people want to gamble on the sport, I'm talking for kids as well, than actually play the sport.
Yeah, right.
And can I go as far as to say that I know it's probably poor context and again, probably get shot down, but, it's almost like grooming kids to gamble. When you see your superstar sports people saying, it's great to have a bet and this and that and whatever, and pick. I mean, I don't even know how it works. Multis and double, triple multis and point, So, no, nothing will change because the Australian government, both governments of any persuasion, we've now got ourselves absolutely wedded to the idea of its revenue. And I remember, I think it was the late Kerry Packer said this at some stage, gambling is taxation of the poor. People who can gamble, like with Kerry, you could whack on a sheep station or double or nothing, that's fine. You can afford a sheep station. With the poor old, the damage done by it. But anyway, nothing's changed. I'm still butting my head up against a brick wall there, but I'll keep every time I say that, how we just turn a blind eye to something that's just a bloody blight on society.
So what's your take now? You made the move from being an executive into the boardroom, so you've given us one view of a certain board behaviour. You enjoying it?
Oh, mate, I'm a perfect director. Yeah, I've got to say that, haven't I? Mate, any board have me on it's a problem, eh?
Some pretty big boards.
No, look, it's been interesting, in a positive sense. You go from, you spend your basically your career at the lead dog, as the Alaskans say with the sled dogs. The lead dog, it's good being out there because the view always changes. Not so flash being the dogs behind him. But no, look, it's been interesting. You move from the cut and thrust, the fun, the adrenaline, all that sort of stuff of making the decisions and thinking about strategy and executing it, and then you try and find the right balance just to sit in the background there and make a positive contribution. So I tend to only focus on those areas that I think I can make a contribution versus turn up and just rabbiting on to try and convince people that I'm smart, because everyone knows that that's not. Everyone probably knows what the truth is anyway. But you get the other positive. You get to experience some different industries, and the whole process of, because I basically had one job, my whole life in one industry. So often said my skills aren't very wide, but hopefully they're fairly deep. Then you're like playing for a new footy team. You turn up and you're mixing it with people who've got big reputations in business, and you try and learn from what they're doing and what they're not doing, and others, and so it's an interesting experience. But I do miss the cut and thrust of making the decisions and whatnot.
So just on that, Mick, we're talking about an election. We're talking about politicians, leadership. Is business finally in tune with the governments of today, or there's still a lot of work to be done?
That's an interesting question too. I think in some areas, business is doing their own thing with profit as a motive, typically, and we talk particularly in energy.
Well, you didn't work for a charity.
Yeah, no, that's right. No, I always say I'm not working for a charity. I'm here to make money. So that's what businesses do. But in the last couple of years, there's been a big push in ESG, not just in energy, but just across the paddock. You've had all the whole diversity, inclusion, which, I just used to take that as a given. Everyone looks the same to me, so I never thought about it, that maybe that's because I come from the bush. Whereas, you knock around people now and they can't help tell you that they're this or they're that or whatever. And I think, oh, really? Well, fine, okay, didn't notice. So, business, it's a bit more, I think, particularly a fair bit's moved in the last couple of years. So it's a bit more challenging in respect of the inside the business. Having a profit motive, yes, that's still the key motive, but you can't say that too bluntly, because you got to be feeling good for everyone. Yeah. And then I think governments, they're leaning on businesses more as in the past as well, I think.
What do you mean?
Oh, whether there's interest rate movements, whether there's increase in electricity prices, supply chains in supermarkets, it's all politics. That's what there's a lot of politics around the place, and politicians, they're there only to win the next election. I've given up on thinking that some politician will turn up with here's a 10 or 15 year plan and getting bipartisan support. Now, and I don't know whether that's permanent or whether it's an outcome of the social media internet age. I keep harking back to who I thought were great politicians, both sides, Bob Hawke and Keating and Howard, Costello. They could absorb an issue, melt it down into a message and sell it, and do exactly, I'm only repeating what they've said. Here's the issue, here's where we need to get to, here's the winners, here's the losers, and this is how we're going to adjust it, and sell it. But, maybe I see the world too simplistically. Can you do that these days with bloody social media trolls and all that sort of stuff? And see, I'm not even on social media. I couldn't give a rat's what they say about me. Maybe it's bad or good, I don't know. Now talking about hunting, shooting, fishing and pigs is probably really bad, but,
Well, now we've come out of COVID and it's spirit's pretty high, Mick. What do you reckon we should be looking forward to You said you're in the world of business. You're
Well, look, I think
across the country.
there's huge opportunities, and I'll give you an example. Now you've mentioned that, my wife's got a little business in Warwick up there, and
that's where we go stalk you, do we?
well, just remember, become tooled up. So, COVID hits. Okay, so you've got a whole heap of people out of the airlines, cabin crew, for example. They've been stood down. They're on JobKeeper, whatever.
Yep.
And of course, you think of it, cabin crew, what's their skills? Huge interpersonal skills, dealing with dickheads on planes, get up and pick the pointy in there. Wow, I've got an upgrade on points. A couple of them I met just recently. They just went for a trip out, jumped in the car one day, a couple of mates, they happened to be women, and turned up at, I don't know, some Port Longridge or somewhere, and the bloke in the pub, he's got talking, they're staying there, and he said, "Oh, can you pull beers?" "Oh, give it a go." So, over the course of an hour one night, that turns into these couple of women stayed there for a couple of days, for, I don't know, obviously got paid or something, but so then the publican and his wife could have a break.
Yeah, right.
What I'm going to, that's turned into a business.
Yeah, right. Oh, so they're relieving other pubs, are they?
Yeah, because they went back and told another one of their mates, and all of a sudden, that's a business there.
Yeah.
So now they got the it's called business called Boss Break, and I give it a shocking name, Boss Break. But yeah, so there's always places like you can imagine, mum and dad, that it's 24/7.
Yeah.
And of course, you do that for 4 or 5 years, and you probably want to sell out and move on. But that's an example of people who, and let's go back to the cabin crew, they got paid out or wherever they were, early retirement. So let's just say they're in their 50s or something like that. So they got plenty of life left. So fantastic. And there's heaps of examples like that. You what might appear to be a bad situation coming out of COVID, all of a sudden, bang, you've got there's an old revenue stream.
So do you think there's a real entrepreneurial feel out there in Australia now? Or more so than it used to be?
I'll say yes. And it's around because people have now had a bit of time to think. We're all used to going to the office.
Yep.
And for the last couple of years, people have not been going to the office, and the thinkers have been thinking. They're thinking, "Oh, well, I'm just as productive as at home." And then you get, okay, I'll go and buy a little farm or something down somewhere else, and the whole Internet of Things is all
the ecosystems.
Yeah. It's easy to say it's been negative, but I think ultimately it'll be positive because it's forced people to just think about their lives in a different way, and hopefully level of happiness has probably gone up as well. I always think back, I did an MBA about 200 years ago. I was out in the 80s, I think, something. And one of the economics lecturers, always remember this, he said, the Industrial Revolution was good and bad for society because the whole idea of it was that we get industrialise the place. That means that people won't have to do as much physical labour. So that means we can all have a bit more leisure time. And he said the only thing that people got wrong at the time was they didn't factor in human selfishness, in the sense of the Industrial Revolution happened, and then the industrial titans became titans by buying it all up and then taking all the money, so people had to still work doing something to survive.
Yeah.
And I just contrast that to COVID because I think something similar has happened in a good positive sense versus negative. With COVID, people have been forced to work at home, and I think quite a number of people thought, well, I don't really like going to the office all the time now. I don't need to. I'm not going to work as much. So that's a good thing, if you follow me there.
Yeah.
So I think that's a so-called tectonic shift in the way we'll see work in future.
Have we moved on from COVID now? Because I'm just about done with it.
Well, I think we have. Isn't that interesting? At the start of this, and this is just a factual statement. So you had prime ministers and chief ministers and bloody premiers and all that sort of stuff on a daily basis offering collective condolences to the sad passing of an 85-year-old in palliative care.
Yes.
Whereas now, I think I heard in the radio today that there was 40 people died of or whatever COVID today. just indicative of how, people just move on. And, if we had what's my point there? My point there is from the very start of COVID, had we focused on protecting the vulnerable aggressively, I think we would have been in a better position. But anyway, post-COVID, everyone's going to say, yeah, I told you I was exactly right what I predicted. Mm-hmm. But there's some people still want COVID to be theirs. Others don't. But yeah.
One last bit of expert opinion here, Mick. You're pretty good with the New South Wales Rugby League coaches.
Yes.
So has Freddie hasn't called you up yet?
No, Freddie still hadn't called me. But I think with his success, he's probably forgotten my phone number now. Buggering. But no,
So what are we looking forward to? We're not too far away from the state of origin, which is great to bring everybody back together again.
Yeah, same old story, Greg. The Maroons will go into it as underdogs.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, the Blues are red hot favourites. They are current. But both Freddie and Billy Slater, they're both working for Channel 9. So okay. I reckon, you probably ask Channel 9 who's going to win.
Fair enough.
No, I think the Maroons will, I think just Broncos are playing pretty well at the moment. So I think Maroons, they'll be a force to be reckoned with.
So if I'm a young Australian or I'm an old Australian, what should I be thinking about when we walk into that election booth? And who do you think is going to be the victor?
Wow, mate, I'm not a politician, but I am concerned about the future of the country. All I'll say is I don't go for independence. We kid ourselves in Australia that, independents keep the bastards honest and senates and all that sort of stuff. But the fact is in Australia, we have an election federal every 3 years. If a party does an appalling job, you can get rid of them in 3 years, which we've done many times. So, no, my view is go in, vote for one of the major parties, let them govern in their own right. We don't like it in 3 years, get rid of them. Worst thing possible is to have either, my side of politics tainted with the absolutely nutter right-wing fringe, because that's a recipe for disaster, and just blatant pork barrelling all over the countryside, which is bad, or on the other side of politics with the bloody nutter Greens. Their focus is just on stuff that appeals to inner city dwellers, so which is bad for us out there. So no, I reckon give the major parties a go. And as to who's going to win, I think probably leaning towards hung parliament.
Yeah, well, that's scary.
But yeah, one thing about bloody politics, I saw this quote the other day, which I think for younger people out there, just like living in the country, in the property, it's the cycles of life. Your spring comes, your calves, your lambs drop, all that sort of stuff, and just the cycle of life. So, and the cycle of politics, good times create weak people, and I think we're right there now. We've had good times for 30 years. Weak people create bad times, and we're talking about potentially pretty messy governments. Bad times create strong people because they want to get out of it, and strong people create good times, and so it goes on. Yes, we'll see how it all plays out.
Well, that, Mick, as usual, it's been very entertaining.
Hey, thanks, Greg. That's great. Really good to catch up and great time to be around. So thank you and look forward to next time.
You've been listening to No Limitations.